Before we dive in, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss the next jaw-dropping drama. Trust me, you'll want to be here for what comes next. You won't believe what happened the day I pulled up to my family's secluded mountain cabin. The air was crisp, the pine trees whispered in the wind, and I thought I was in for a peaceful weekend retreat. But peace was the last thing I was going to get, because standing on my porch, arms crossed and sunglasses on, was the woman who would turn my weekend upside down. Her name? Karen. Now, when I say Karen, I don't mean a sweet neighbor or a friendly visitor. I mean the Karen. The type who believes every rule bends for her. The type who thinks authority flows through her veins. She looked at me as if I was trespassing on my own property. "Finally!" she snapped before I could even get my bags out of the truck. "You're late. My guests will be arriving any minute, and this place isn't ready." I froze. Guests? What was she talking about? She strutted closer, clipboard in hand, flipping through papers as if she was managing some sort of event. "The Homeowners Association approved my request for a special gathering," she announced. "And since your cabin has the most space, we'll be using it to host 50 people this weekend. Don't worry, you'll get a thank you note afterward." I thought she was joking. I laughed, shaking my head, but her face stayed stone cold. She wasn't joking. Karen genuinely believed she had the authority to take over my family's cabin, Aripaidi, place my grandfather built with his own hands decades ago. "Sorry, Karen," I replied, standing tall. "This is private property, my property. And no one, certainly not the HOA, is moving 50 strangers into my home." Her eyes narrowed, and she jabbed her pen toward me. "You're making a mistake. The HOA always has the final say. And I've already sent out invitations. My guests are driving up the mountain as we speak." I could feel my blood boiling. This wasn't a simple misunderstanding. It was a full-blown power grab. She wanted my cabin, and she wasn't leaving without a fight. In that moment, I realized I had two options: back down and watch my family's sacred retreat overrun by Karen's army of party guests, or stand my ground and fight back against her entitled scheme. Little did Karen know, I wasn't about to roll over. I had a plan forming in my mind, one that would not only stop her in her tracks but shock every single person who thought they could side with her. And trust me, what happened next left the entire neighborhood speechless. Karen didn't waste time proving just how serious she was. As I stood on my own porch, dumbfounded, I heard the distant rumble of engines winding up the mountain road. Sure enough, headlights began snaking through the trees, one after another. Cars, SUVs, even a charter bus. My stomach dropped. She wasn't bluffing. Her so-called guests were actually on their way. I turned to Karen. "You invited all these people here? To my property?" She smirked like a queen surveying her kingdom. "Of course. I told them about the bonfire, the catered food, the live band. It's going to be the event of the year. You should be honored your cabin was chosen." Chosen? This wasn't some HOA raffle. This was theft. My grandfather's cabin wasn't some community clubhouse. It was our family's legacy. Every stone in the fireplace, every log in the walls carried a piece of history. And now this woman wanted to fill it, with drunk strangers trampling mud through the halls. Not on my watch. I grabbed my phone, already thinking about calling the sheriff. But Karen, sharp as ever, waved her clipboard like a badge of authority. "Don't even bother." The HOA president signed off. "That means it's official. If you try to stop this, you'll be the one in violation. And trust me, violations don't look good on your record." The nerve of her. She thought the HOA had more power than the deed in my hand. Meanwhile, the first vehicles pulled up. People began piling out, dressed in party clothes, arms loaded with coolers, folding chairs, even fireworks. They looked confused when they saw me standing there blocking the porch. One man shouted, "Hey, are we in the right place?" Karen said the cabin would be ready. Karen stepped forward like a general rallying her troops. "Yes, you're in the right place. This is the cabin. Just ignore him, he's being difficult." I clenched my jaw. This was escalating faster than I expected. But if Karen thought I'd cave under pressure, she had no idea who she was dealing with. I raised my voice. Listen up. This cabin belongs to me and my family. No one has permission to step inside. If you do, it's trespassing, and I will treat it as such. The crowd exchanged uncertain glances. Some hesitated on the gravel path. Others looked back at Karen for reassurance. She hissed under her breath at me. You're ruining everything. Don't think you'll get away with this. But what she didn't know was that I was about to turn the tables in a way she never saw coming. Because while she thought she had the upper hand, I had a plan to shock everyone, including her 50 guests. The crowd lingered at the edge of the driveway, shuffling awkwardly, unsure of whether to follow Karen or listen to me. The smell of pine mixed with the exhaust fumes from their cars, and the tension was so thick you could cut it with an axe. Karen, never one to lose face, puffed up her chest and waved her arms. Everyone, don't listen to him. This cabin is under HOA jurisdiction, which means it's under my jurisdiction. The party goes on. She marched up the steps and actually tried to push past me, aiming for the front door. That was the moment I stepped forward, blocking her path completely. My voice dropped, calm but firm. Karen, if you take one step into this cabin, you'll be trespassing. And if you think I won't defend my family's property, you're mistaken. The crowd murmured nervously. A woman whispered, Wait, he owns it? Not the HOA? A few people started to realize something was off. Karen spun toward them, fury flashing in her eyes. Don't be fooled. He's just trying to keep this space to himself. He doesn't want us to celebrate. He doesn't care about community spirit. I couldn't help but laugh, bitterly. Community spirit? Karen, you didn't ask permission. You didn't even talk to me. You just decided my home was yours to use. That's not community. That's theft. The word theft hit hard. I could see several of her guests glance at each other, shifting uncomfortably. They weren't expecting to crash someone's private retreat. They thought they'd been invited. Karen, sensing her grip slipping, doubled down. Fine. If you won't open the door, we'll take this outside. The lawn is HOA property, and I'll have my guests set up out here. You can't stop that. That's when I dropped the first part of my plan. I pulled a folded document from my pocket, the original deed to the cabin and its surrounding land, signed decades ago by my grandfather himself. I held it up for all to see. This land isn't HOA property. It never was. The association has no authority here. My family owned it long before the HOA was even formed. If any of you step foot past that road without my permission, you'll be trespassing. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the chirping crickets seemed to pause. Karen's jaw dropped, her face paling as she realized the crowd was no longer buying her story. But instead of backing down, she did what Karens do best. She snapped. Her voice rose into a shriek. This isn't over. If you think a piece of paper will stop me, you're dead wrong. I'll show you what the HOA can really do. And with that, she stormed off to rally her guests again, setting the stage for the shocking move she would make next. Karen disappeared into the crowd for a few minutes, her heels crunching over gravel as she whispered furiously to different groups. I could see her gesturing wildly toward me, waving her clipboard like it was a weapon. Slowly, murmurs spread through the guests, and before long, she marched back to the porch with renewed confidence. She stood tall, hands on hips. All right, everyone, listen up. He thinks he can bully us out of our community space. But we don't have to tolerate this. The HOA rules are clear. Shared spaces are for everyone. And this cabin falls under shared use. I shook my head in disbelief. Karen, I just showed proof this cabin and land are privately owned. You can't twist HOA bylaws to steal someone's property. But Karen was relentless. She raised her phone, smirking. If you won't cooperate, I'll call the sheriff myself. We'll let the law decide who's right. I almost welcomed the idea. Go ahead, please. I'd love for law enforcement to set the record straight. But Karen wasn't really calling the sheriff. Instead, she called the HOA president, her so-called ally. Within minutes, a black SUV rolled up the mountain road, and out stepped a man in a suit far too formal for the woods. He looked annoyed but determined, carrying a thick binder. "This is Mr. Thompson, our HOA president," Karen announced proudly. "He'll settle this once and for all." Thompson adjusted his tie and gave me a cold stare. "Sir, you're creating a disturbance. This gathering has been approved by the association, and unless you cooperate, fines and penalties will be issued." A ripple of relief passed through the guests, they thought. Authority had arrived on Karen's side. But I stayed calm. "Mr. Thompson, with all due respect, your association has no jurisdiction here. This property predates the HOA entirely. If you doubt me, I suggest you read this deed." I handed him the document. His smug expression wavered as his eyes scanned the paper. For a moment, the only sound was the rustle of pages and the shifting feet of confused guests. Finally, he looked up, clearly uncomfortable. "Karen, this deed is legitimate. The cabin and land are exempt from HOA authority." The crowd gasped. Some even laughed nervously. Karen's face turned crimson. She snatched the binder from his hands and shouted, "No! This can't be right. You promised me this would work." But Thompson raised his palms. "I promised nothing. If you misled these people, that's on you." The tide had turned. The guests, once loyal, now glared at Karen for dragging them into a mess. But Karen wasn't finished. Oh no. If humiliation couldn't break me, she was about to try something even more shocking. Karen's face was twisted with rage, her carefully planned takeover crumbling in front of 50 stunned witnesses. But instead of backing down, she doubled down. Her voice rose to a screech. "Everyone, don't listen to him. He forged those papers. This is a setup. If the HOA won't take control, then we'll do it ourselves. Grab your things. Move in." The crowd hesitated. Some shifted uncomfortably, realizing they were inches away from committing trespassing. A few even started backing toward their cars. But Karen, desperate, ran up the porch steps again, jabbing a finger in my face. "You think you've won? I'll make sure you regret ever standing against me. You're about to be the most hated man in this community." That was the moment I put the second part of my plan into action. I calmly pulled my phone from my pocket and raised it high, showing the screen to everyone. "See this? I've been recording since the moment Karen showed up. Every word, every threat, every attempt to take over my home, it's all documented." A collective gasp rippled through the guests. Some started whispering. Karen froze, her face draining of color. "And guess what?" I continued. "This isn't just a private recording. I already sent a live feed to the sheriff's department and uploaded the evidence to the HOA's official community group. By now, half the neighborhood has seen exactly what's happening here." The guests erupted, some angry at Karen, others laughing in disbelief. A man shook his head and muttered, "Unbelievable. She dragged us all the way up here for this?" Karen tried to snatch the phone, but I stepped back. Too late. The damage is done. And then, as if on cue, flashing blue lights appeared through the trees. 2 sheriff's cruisers pulled up, gravel crunching under their tires. Officers stepped out, hands on their belts, scanning the crowd. One of them asked firmly, "What's going on here?" Before Karen could spin another lie, half the guests started talking at once, pointing at her, explaining how she tricked them into coming. The sheriff raised his hand for silence, then turned to me. I showed him the deed and the recording. He nodded slowly, then faced Karen. "Ma'am, you're trespassing, disturbing the peace, and attempting to organize an unlawful gathering on private property. You'll need to come with us." Karen shrieked, "This isn't fair!" "I am the HOA." But her words fell flat as the officers escorted her to the cruiser. The once loyal guests scattered, some embarrassed, others laughing at the downfall of the self-proclaimed queen of the neighborhood. As the last car disappeared down the mountain, I stood on the porch, looking at the quiet forest again. My grandfather's cabin remained safe, and Karen's reign of entitlement was over. But the best part? The entire community finally saw her true colors, and they were never going to forget it.